The shot rang out, echoing across the chamber, before anyone thought to move. It was a clean, merciless sound, final and hollow. The boy had been laughing a heartbeat earlier, a sound too bright for the polished marble of the Galactic Council Hall. That laughter was cut short, silenced by the pulse of an alien rifle. He crumpled without ceremony, a tangle of limbs and youth, sprawled upon the shining floor meant for treaties, not corpses. Jonathan Hale did not scream. He did not lunge. He did not so much as blink as the warmth of his son's blood spread across the white tiles, creeping outward like an ink spill beneath the gazes of 100 alien dignitaries. In the eternal second that followed, the chamber waited for grief, rage, denial, any of the primitive displays that lesser beings would call natural. Instead, the man simply breathed, slowly, evenly, his face smoothed into a stillness that unsettled more than any outburst could have. The guard who had fired adjusted his stance, a reptilian brute with scaled hands tightening on the weapon. His orders had been whispered from a dais, a curt nod from one of the council's senior voices. Teach them humility. And so he had, with a trigger pull. His eyes now flickered uneasily, for the human before him did not weep as expected. Mr. Hale, crooned an avian delegate, feathers trembling with self-importance. A regrettable accident. Children, so fragile, are they not? Perhaps this is a lesson best carried home. Jonathan's gaze shifted, not to the bird-like speaker, not to the guard, but to the small object that had rolled free from his boy's pocket. A scuffed leather ball, hand-stitched, its surface worn smooth from play. It stopped at his shoe, and only then did he move, bending with a deliberate grace to lift it. His thumb traced the seam, the way he had countless times when teaching his son how to throw. He straightened, slipping the ball into the inner pocket of his suit coat as though returning it to safekeeping. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle, a low baritone trained in courtesy. An accident, you say? The words were neither question nor accusation, simply repeated back into the charged air like a mirror. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some aliens shifted in discomfort, others leaned forward in amusement. Fragile creatures, the humans, the council reminded themselves. So prone to sentiment, so poorly adapted for the rigors of the greater galaxy. Yet something in the humans' composure did not fit the pattern. I'll require, Hale continued, adjusting the cuffs of his immaculate black suit, an official apology for this unfortunate mishap. Written, signed, stamped with whatever seal you people revere these days. He smiled faintly, though the smile never touched his eyes. It's a small courtesy. My son had excellent penmanship. I'd like to see if yours measures up. The chamber erupted with overlapping voices. Some scoffed. Some chuckled at the human's absurdity. Others hissed their disapproval of the guard's rash action. The presiding counselor, a being of translucent skin whose veins glowed faintly with each word, lifted a hand for silence. You presume much, human. This council is not subject to the demands of primitives. You came here to beg for a place among the stars, and now you stand here issuing ultimatums. Jonathan tilted his head, considering the words as though tasting a wine before swallowing. Begging, he said softly, was never my trade. Negotiation, yes. Compromise, when it served both sides. But begging? No. My people don't much care for the posture of knees on stone. Your child is gone. Accept this truth and leave while we still permit it. The avian voice again, sharper now. Jonathan's eyes lifted to the speaker, calm as still water. You misunderstand, he said. You believe you've ended something here. In fact, you've only begun it. A nervous chuckle rippled through the assembly. One insectoid ambassador leaned toward another and clicked mandibles. Empty threat. He's cornered. But the crystalline elder at the far end of the chamber, a figure who had watched empires rise and die with geological patience, shifted uneasily. Its body emitted a faint hum, a resonance of warning. Be wary, it murmured to no one in particular. The silence of a predator is not peace. It is calculation. Jonathan clasped his hands loosely behind his back, posture relaxed, as if he were standing at the edge of a porch back on Earth, watching a sunset. He even rocked on his heels, a small habit that would have seemed endearingly human were it not for the blood cooling at his feet. "I'll give you time," he said finally. "Draft your apology. Choose your words carefully. I'll be patient for a little while." With that, he turned. Each step of his polished shoes echoed across the vast chamber, a hollow metronome marking the uneasy silence left behind. No one stopped him. No one dared. The door hissed open at his approach, spilling pale light across his retreating figure, and then closed again, leaving the council in thick, uneasy air. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, the reptilian guard shifted his grip on the rifle and muttered, "Why didn't he break?" "Because," thought the crystalline elder, as its body vibrated with unease, "some things are not meant to break. Some things bend, coil, and wait." Jonathan walked the long corridor beyond the chamber with the measured stride of a man late for dinner, but unwilling to rush. His son's baseball pressed a steady weight against his chest, each step driving the truth deeper. The boy was gone. A father's heart screamed for grief, but the soldier's mind, long buried under the diplomat's smile, clicked into motion with the precision of a lock opening. He passed ornate windows that overlooked the capital's sprawl of alien architecture. Towers spiraled in impossible geometries, colors too bright for human eyes. He saw none of it. Instead, he remembered a different skyline, one of steel and glass and neon signs buzzing against a summer night. His son had begged to see this foreign world, to taste its markets, to walk its streets. Jonathan had promised safety, and now safety lay bleeding on the council floor. He paused at a viewport, letting the artificial sunlight glare against his reflection. A tall man, broad-shouldered, hair trimmed with military neatness. His tie slightly loosened, as though he had just stepped out of a late meeting. Nothing remarkable, until one looked into the eyes. There, the diplomat's warmth thinned to reveal something colder, older, patient as winter. The eyes of a man who had once walked through 1,000 corpses and kept walking. Behind him, the chamber still buzzed with argument, confusion, mockery. Ahead of him stretched silence, a silence that would not remain empty for long. He touched the baseball in his pocket, a father's gesture, a soldier's promise. And when at last he spoke, his voice was no longer meant for the council, but for himself, low and steady as steel. "That was your first mistake." The corridor swallowed his words, carrying them into the vast machinery of the city, a whisper soon to become a storm. The council chamber emptied like a carcass after scavengers had feasted. Delegates drifted away in clusters, muttering in tongues of feathers, chitin, and steel. Yet the echoes of the shot remained, hanging in the vaulted air. A boy's death in such a hall was not easily forgotten, though many tried already to bury it under ceremony and protocol. Rumor moved faster than light. Within an hour, the story had rippled across the capital. A human child felled by council order or accident or provocation, depending on which whisper one chose to believe. By the second hour, taverns buzzed with theories. By the third, entire species debated what the curious ape from Seoul would do next. Some laughed over their drinks. Certain humans would fold, grovel, or flee. Others remembered fragments of old reports, battlefields smoldering on fringe worlds where human soldiers had once left their mark. In the private quarters of the council's avian delegate, a gaggle of lesser officials preened and cawed in nervous delight. "Fragile things, these humans," one chirped, polishing the rings around his eyes. "They bruise with a touch, shatter with a glare. He will return to his planet humbled." A younger aide, feathers still mottled with youth, hesitated. But his face, when the boy fell, he did not break. He did not grieve. The elder ruffled his wings dismissively. That is their weakness, disguised as strength. They numb themselves, because true warriors would never carry grief in silence. It will consume him soon enough. The aide said nothing, but unease nested in his breast. Across the city, in a crystalline tower that sang faintly with every breeze, another conversation trembled through mineral tones. The crystalline elder, who had spoken in the chamber, now hummed low and sharp, a warning note. "We have stepped upon a fault line," it said to its kin. "The surface is smooth, but beneath is pressure enough to shatter worlds." Its kin resonated with skepticism. They are few. They are young. They are sentimental. Perhaps, the elder replied. But sentiment, when crushed, transmutes into vengeance. And vengeance is a stone rolling downhill. Meanwhile, in quieter quarters, Jonathan Hale sat at a simple desk provided for diplomatic guests. A lamp glowed overhead, casting amber across polished wood. Before him lay sheets of paper, real paper, fibers pressed and bound, a rare luxury in a galaxy of screens. He preferred the drag of pen on surface, the permanence of ink. Words committed in such a way carried weight. He wrote not to the council, but to old names stored in memory. Each letter was brief, stripped to the bone. Each phrase coated with histories only the recipients would recall. Pick up the bat. Bring the choir. Light the porch. A casual observer would dismiss them as folksy metaphors, scraps of human idiom with no military relevance. But those who received them would know, mobilize the strike fleet, awaken the Black Ops Choir Regiment, ignite the contingency protocols hidden for decades. Jonathan paused, tapping his pen against the rim of his chip diner mug. The coffee had gone cold, bitter on his tongue, but he drank anyway. He stared at the baseball resting on the desk beside the lamp, its stitches stark in the light. His hand lingered over it, a father's instinct warring with a predator's patience. Then he set it aside, folded another letter, and sealed it with wax. The walls carried whispers. Microphones embedded in the corners funneled every rustle, every breath, back to council intelligence. They would pore over his words, search for weapons hidden in the cadence. And they would find nothing, because the true weapons were not inked on paper, but written in the marrow of men waiting for his signal. Elsewhere in the capital, alien analysts pored over Earth culture in a frenzy of study. One insectoid scholar sat hunched before glowing screens, antennae twitching as it devoured human archives. It read of baseball leagues, of rivalries that split cities in two. It puzzled over barbecue competitions where entire communities gathered to perfect smoke and spice. It recoiled at headlines of Florida man and could not determine whether they were satire or proof of madness. They celebrate chaos, it whispered to itself. They enshrine unpredictability. Another file revealed a film, an old western, a man in a hat squaring off in the dust, waiting, until the other drew first. The scholar's mandibles clicked uneasily. They mythologized patience. They worshipped the strike delayed. Reports were carried back to the council, where they were largely ignored. Too much noise, too little threat. Yet not all dismissed them. A reptilian fleet commander, scarred from campaigns long past, read the same reports with narrowing eyes. He remembered fighting humans once, decades ago, on a forgotten moon. They had fought not for territory, not for glory, but for each other. When cornered, they had smiled with bloody teeth, as though the very act of being pressed to the edge gave them strength. He had survived only because retreat had been ordered. Now, as he scanned the report of the Diplomat's silence, he felt the old dread coil again. Back in his quarters, Jonathan rose and buttoned his jacket. The boy's death had carved something open inside him, but instead of spilling grief, it filled with clarity. He replayed the counselor's words in his mind, primitive, fragile, begging. The arrogance was almost artful in its blindness. They thought humanity an upstart child, barely worthy of notice. They had no idea they had placed their hands on the throat of a wolf and called it a lamb. That evening, he attended a reception hosted by the council. Chandeliers glowed above, alien delicacies lined tables. Laughter spilled across the hall. Diplomats of every shape and species mingled, pretending civility. Jonathan entered alone, nodded politely to those who met his eye, and drifted to the edge of the room where a bowl of salted nuts rested. He plucked a few, ate them casually, and sipped water from a glass too ornate for his taste. An insectoid delegate approached, all chittering mandibles and smug curiosity. "Mr. Hale," it rasped, "you are remarkably composed. Your people, do they not collapse under grief?" Jonathan chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and offered the insect a peanut from the bowl. "Funny thing about collapse," he said. "Sometimes when a thing breaks, the pieces cut deeper than the hole ever did. Glass shard, you know. The insectoid stared, confused. Jonathan smiled warmly, as though sharing a harmless joke. He left the insect clutching the nut in silence, and moved on. By midnight, reports flowed through the Council's intelligence networks. Strange patterns in human communications. Signals bouncing between relay stations that should have been dormant. Outposts going dark without explanation. But when cross-referenced, the anomalies made no sense, forming no coherent strategy. Council analysts dismissed them as coincidence. Only the reptilian commander, reviewing the data alone in his quarters, recognized the shape of a net being cast. He remembered Earth idioms he had once studied. One came to mind now, chilling in its simplicity, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Meanwhile, Jonathan returned to his room, loosened his tie, and sat again at the desk. He read the last letter he had written, lips tightening at its brevity. Time to come home. It was not addressed to a person, but to something larger, older, a fleet held in reserve, a shadow arm of humanity never admitted to the Council. With a flick of his wrist, he sealed the letter and placed it beside the others. Soon, couriers would carry them outward, disguised in the normal traffic of diplomacy. Soon, silence would shift into movement. As he leaned back, exhaustion whispered at the edges of his mind. He closed his eyes and saw his son laughing, glove too large for his hand, running across a green field beneath an Earth sky. The image burned, bright and fleeting. He opened his eyes again to the sterile walls of alien stone. The contrast was enough to stiffen his spine. The city outside slept, towers glittering under the light of artificial moons. Within those towers, voices rose in debate, in speculation, in arrogance. Some believed the human was broken. Others feared he was coiling. None could agree. And in the darkness of his quarters, Jonathan whispered a truth no one yet understood, a vow carried only by the cold air. You've mistaken my patience for peace. That's your second mistake. At that moment, on the farthest edge of the system, a human transmission slipped past Council filters. It carried no coordinates, no orders, no code. It carried only sound, a lullaby, sung by hundreds of voices in unison. The melody was gentle, almost tender, but its harmonies were disciplined, each note precise, as if rehearsed by soldiers rather than singers. The reptilian commander, listening alone in his quarters, felt his scales prickle. This is not a song, he muttered, dread sinking into his bones. This is formation. He looked to the stars beyond the viewport, and for the first time in years, he wished for retreat. The fleets move first. Arrogance always moves first. On the dawn after the lullaby slipped across the stars, the Galactic Council issued a decree to contain the humans. Contain, a word chosen to avoid the nakedness of destroy. It sounded clinical, measured, reasonable. Behind it was nothing but fear wearing a mask of superiority. Orders flashed across channels, summoning warships to human colonies along the frontier. The Council meant to make a spectacle of power, to remind the young species of its supposed place. Jonathan Hale read the decree in silence. He sat at the same desk where his letters still rested, though most had already been sent. He held the parchment between steady fingers, eyes scanning each line. When he finished, he folded the decree neatly, set it aside, and picked up his coffee mug. The drink was lukewarm, bitter. He drank it anyway. He knew what would happen next, not in vague speculation, but in the sharp precision of a man who had rehearsed 1,000 contingencies in the quiet corners of his mind. The fleets would converge. They would circle human colonies like wolves around sheep. They would expect pleas, perhaps a few token shots fired in defiance. They would expect weakness. They would not expect the trap. Beyond the Council's perception, humanity's ships had long been shadows at the edge of maps, humble and underestimated. Their hulls lacked the gleaming sophistication of Council craft. Their engines seemed crude. But Hale knew the truth. What looked like primitiveness was disguise. What seemed like slowness was restraint. Every bolt, every rivet, every line of code had been prepared for the inevitability of this day. In the crystalline tower, The elder hummed with rising unease as it felt the weight of the fleets leaving port. The ground trembles, it intoned. They believe they march across stone, yet it is glass beneath their feet. Its kin ignored the warning, celebrating the show of strength. They would regret the deafness. The first encounter came at Delta 9, a mining outpost orbiting a barren moon. 20 alien warships dropped from slipspace, surrounding the human station. The commander sent a broadcast: surrender your installations. Abandon your claim. Resist and be annihilated. No reply came. The warships advanced, energy cannons humming. But as they prepared to fire, something subtle shifted in the silence. A low tone, almost a hum, resonated through their comm systems. At first dismissed as interference, then noticed for its uncanny rhythm. A human voice followed, not raised in anger, but carried on melody. A hymn, sung in unison by unseen voices. The fleet faltered, and then the outpost's lights flared to life. From the barren moon's shadow, ships emerged. Not gleaming, not grand, angular, scarred, built for war, not for parade. They moved with terrifying coordination, as though each vessel were a finger of a single hand. Before the alien fleet could adjust, the trap closed. Missiles streaked in silence, carving arcs of fire through space. Electronic warfare blinded sensors. Human ships darted where they should not have been able to go, cutting lines, severing formations. The hymn never ceased, woven through the comms, haunting. The battle lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes, and 20 council warships burned. The human losses numbered 2. The survivors fled into slipspace, carrying with them the horror of what they had seen. Humans did not fight like prey. They fought like predators, wearing patience as armor. The report arrived at the council chamber before the embers cooled. Delegates erupted in disbelief. Impossible. Fabrication. Trickery. But the reptilian commander, who had once fought humans, knew better. His scales prickled as he hissed, "It begins." That evening, the council held another session, a storm of voices colliding beneath vaulted ceilings. Jonathan Hale was there, seated with the poise of a man at a dinner party rather than a war council. He cracked a peanut between his fingers, chewed, and listened to their panic with polite detachment. "You are destabilizing the galaxy," cried an amphibious delegate. "Your kind must accept boundaries, or all will collapse." Jonathan dabbed his lips with a napkin, then set it aside. "Funny thing about boundaries," he said lightly. "Draw them too close, and people get jumpy. Step across them, though," he shrugged. "Well, you just saw what happens. Do you threaten us with extinction?" His eyes twinkled, but his voice remained smooth. "Oh no, extinction is such an ugly word. I prefer adjustment. My people are very good at adjusting." A nervous laugh rippled, though no one could tell if he had meant humor or warning. While the chamber argued, reports continued to flood in. Fleets vanished in sectors thought secure. Colonies fortified themselves, only to find human saboteurs already embedded in their systems. Entire supply lines collapsed overnight. The council had expected a skirmish. Instead, they found themselves ensnared in a net woven long before the boy had ever set foot in their hall. Jonathan knew they still did not understand. To them, war was theater, ships arrayed in grand formations, clashes of honor and spectacle. To humans, war was a hunt. It was ambush, deception, patience. He had taught this truth to enemies before, and now he would teach it again. On the third day, another fleet launched toward the Terran colony of Elysium 3, confident they would crush the settlement quickly. When they arrived, the colony appeared undefended. Fields stretched golden under twin suns. Children played in meadows. Farmers waved from their work. The fleet advanced, confused by the lack of resistance. Then the fields split open. Silos revealed missile arrays disguised as barns. The children were not children at all, but drones broadcasting false signals. The farmers' waves were decoys triggering hidden batteries. In a single moment, the pastoral calm became a battlefield. The human colonists, ordinary men and women with rifles older than the council's archives, fought with a fury that stunned the invaders. When the dust settled, Elysium, 3 still stood. The alien fleet did not. Jonathan received the report with a nod, as though nothing more than a grocery list had been read aloud. He sat at his desk once again, drafting notes in the same careful hand. "Politeness matters," he murmured, sealing each with wax. Even when declaring war. Back in the capital, fear began to fester. Markets wavered. Traders whispered of human sabotage. Entire sectors braced against shadows they could not find. And still the council quarreled, clinging to arrogance like a drowning man clings to a stone. Jonathan attended their sessions faithfully, listening more than speaking. When he did speak, it was with the same courteous tone that unsettled them more than fury ever could. "I asked for an apology," he reminded them one evening, voice soft as velvet. "You gave me a decree of containment. Perhaps you've misjudged the exchange." The crystalline elder trembled with resonance. "You are not here as a diplomat," it said. Its voice rang like struck glass, clear and cutting. "You are here as a herald." Jonathan inclined his head, acknowledging truth without confirming it. Across the galaxy, human fleets struck again and again. They did not seek territory. They sought humiliation, dismantling the Council's aura of invulnerability piece by piece. They struck fuel depots, communication hubs, strategic choke points. And always, they vanished into silence before counterattack could arrive. The reptilian commander convened his officers in secret. "You do not understand this species," he told them, claws scraping the table. "They fight with their entire history behind them. Every scar, every song, every grave. You killed a child, and now you face not a soldier, not a fleet, but a civilization that refuses to forget." Meanwhile, Jonathan walked the marble corridors of the council palace, his polished shoes echoing with calm certainty. Guards watched him pass with unease, their hands twitching toward weapons. Yet he carried no visible threat, only the weight of inevitability. He paused once before a grand mural depicting the council's long reign, planets bending knee, species pledging loyalty. He studied it with faint amusement. "Funny thing about murals," he murmured. "They never age well when the walls come down." On the 7th day, the trap revealed its scale. Not a single battle, not a single colony, but across the breadth of council space, coordinated strikes erupted. Stations blinked out. Fleets were swallowed whole. Sleeper cells long thought assimilated rose in sudden violence. Humanity had not improvised this war. It had prepared it, cultivated it, waited with the patience of stone. The council realized too late. The human diplomat had not been caught off guard. They had been baited. In the council chamber, pandemonium reigned. Delegates shouted, demanded explanations, hurled accusations. Through it all, Jonathan sat at the edge of the dais, calm, sipping coffee from his chipped mug. He set it down carefully, adjusted his tie, and stood. "My friends," he said warmly, as if addressing neighbors at a town hall, "you've mistaken our courtesy for weakness. You've mistaken our smiles for surrender." But I'm afraid his eyes hardened, Diplomat's mask falling away for the briefest moment. "You've run out of mistakes." The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the council saw him not as a man, but as consequence given form. And then every display screen lit at once. Across the chamber walls, grainy feeds flickered into life. Alien fleets burning, council worlds falling, human banners rising. It was not the future. It was already happening. Jonathan's gaze swept the chamber, voice calm as ever. "I told you I would be patient. I never said I'd be merciful." The capital burned before the council could admit the word. To call it a skirmish would have been convenient. To call it an incident would have softened its edges. But outside the palace walls, towers cracked in half under the pressure of orbital strikes, streets filled with smoke, and the proud skyline of the council's homeworld shuddered like glass under a hammer. Sirens moaned through alien avenues. The scents of ozone, ash, and blood mingled into something neither species nor stone could ignore. Jonathan Hale walked through the palace corridors as though late for an appointment, his polished shoes clicking against the marble. The air quaked with distant detonations, each tremor sending dust from vaulted ceilings to scatter across his shoulders. He brushed it off, casually. To the guards who stood stiff along his path, his calmness was more unsettling than the battles outside. Some gripped their weapons tighter. Some looked away. A few whispered into comms, their voices cracking. None stepped forward to stop him. Behind him trailed a small unit, no more than 5, dressed in the understated attire of aides. To an untrained eye, they looked like clerks or secretaries. To those who knew better, they were soldiers. Mara Quinn with her hair tied back, eyes sharp as razors. Ortiz, broad and silent, his steps heavy as anvils. Bishop, thin and meticulous, fingers twitching with the memory of triggers. 2 more shadows, who had once lived under 1,000 code names. They moved as if a corridor belonged to them, their presence woven into Hale's rhythm, quiet and inevitable. The council chamber lay ahead. Its doors loomed wide, etched with symbols of dominance, unity, eternity. Jonathan paused at the threshold, loosening his diaphragm, as if to breathe easier. He glanced back once at his team. No words passed between them, yet an understanding flared. There would be no return to diplomacy. He pushed the doors open. Inside, chaos reigned. Delegates screamed in their native tongues, their voices colliding like storms. Feathers flew, scales rattled. Crystalline bodies pulsed with agitated light. Holograms displayed fleets collapsing, colonies in flames, transmissions cut short by static. The galaxy's supposed center of order had unraveled into panic. And then they saw him, one man in a black suit, carrying the stillness of a storm's eye. The presiding counselor rose, translucent skin flickering with internal fire. You dare walk into this chamber while your people wage slaughter across the stars. Jonathan's reply was soft, almost courteous. I warned you I'd need time to draft my response. Consider the draft submitted. Guards moved first. For rushed forward, weapons raised. Jonathan did not signal, did not break stride. His aide stepped outward in fluid precision. Mara's blade whispered across the throat of one. Ortiz crushed another's weapon arm before driving him into the ground. Bishop shot twice, each bolt finding a heart. The 4th guard hesitated at the sight of his fellows falling, and Jonathan simply took his weapon from his hands with a polite nod, as if borrowing a pen. The chamber froze. Delegates who had ruled for centuries sat rigid, prey before the predator they had mistaken for lamb. You misunderstand the nature of mercy, Jonathan said, pacing to the center of the chamber. He set the confiscated rifle on the dais, as one might place an unwanted centerpiece. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is a choice. You took from me the one soul who gave meaning to patience. So now I choose otherwise. The crystalline elder hummed, its resonance sharp as alarm bells. You were never a diplomat. You were always a blade. Jonathan turned to it, eyes cold as winter rivers. No, I was a father who wore the mask of diplomacy. You tore that mask away. What stands before you now is consequence. Ortiz and Bishop secured the chamber doors, sealing them shut. Outside, more explosions shook the city. Inside, Jonathan reached into his coat and drew forth the small, scuffed baseball. Its stitches glowed faintly under the chamber's artificial light. He rolled it across the council table, where it wobbled, bumped, and came to rest before the presiding counselor. This, Jonathan whispered, is your apology. The presiding counselor's glow flickered. You cannot undo the council with toys and threats. Jonathan's smile was almost kind. You still think this is about undoing? He raised his gaze to sweep the chamber. This is about unveiling. You have ruled through arrogance, convinced no one would dare challenge your order. We allowed that belief because it suited us. We smiled, we nodded, we learned your games. All the while we prepared. He gestured, and the chamber screen shifted from burning fleets to a new feed, the silhouette of a ship unlike any other, emerging from slipspace. Its hull was vast, its design brutal in simplicity. Along its flank, stenciled letters gleamed in human script. Mother of Vengeance. A ripple of dread passed through the council. The ship dwarfed anything in their registries, a vessel hidden beyond their maps, built in silence, birthed in secrecy. Its weapons arrays bristled like teeth, its hangars swarmed with smaller ships poised like claws. Jonathan's voice dropped to a hush. "We named her for what you created when you murdered my son. The mother of vengeance carries not just my grief, but the wrath of a species that remembers every slight carved into its bones." Outside, the ship unleashed its fury. Beams of white fire lanced downward, not upon civilians, but upon the bastions of Council military power. Orbital defenses crumbled in sheets of molten light. Command centers vanished in silence. In moments, the Council's greatest world became defenseless, its strength hollowed from within. Panic swept the delegates. Some begged, some cursed, some whispered prayers to gods who would not answer. Jonathan raised a hand, silencing them. "You believe yourselves wise," he said. "Yet you never studied us, not truly. You laughed at our chaos, our oddities, our songs, and our games. You saw only madness where there was strategy. You mocked our fragility while we sharpened it into steel. And when you killed a child to humble us, you invited a reckoning you cannot escape." Mara stepped forward, her blade glinting. "Say the word," she murmured. Jonathan shook his head. "Not yet." His gaze lingered on the counselors, weighing each one. "Slaughter here would be too simple. You must live long enough to witness your reigns collapse, to see every banner you raised torn down by hands you once called primitive." The crystalline elder trembled, shards vibrating in despair. "Then what are you if not conquerors?" Jonathan's eyes, hollow and burning, locked onto the elder's facets. "We are what comes after conquest. We are the hand that writes history in the silence of graves. We are humanity, and we do not beg." The chamber fell silent, but for the distant roar of the ship's bombardment. Jonathan pocketed the baseball again, its weight a reminder and a promise. He turned to leave, his aides falling into step. At the threshold, he paused. His voice carried across the chamber one last time. America had a phrase, "Don't poke the bear." You didn't just poke it. You set fire to its den. He stepped into the corridor, doors sealing behind him with a thunderous finality. Outside, the palace trembled under another strike. Above, the mother of vengeance loomed, her shadow cast across the world like judgment itself. And for the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council sat in silence, not rulers, but condemned.